seat. There is an overflow room right next door here. You're welcome to take part in that. And Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Carroll. Here. Senator Caslin. Here. Senator Douglas. Here. Senator Givens. Here. Senator Kerr. Senator McGarvey. Senator Meredith. Here. Senator Nemes. Present. Senator Webb. Senator West. Here. Chair McDaniel.
Here. We're having a quorum. We're duly constituted to conduct business. And obviously today, the only matter for consideration is House Bill 1. In front of you today, you do have a Senate committee substitute to that bill. At this time, the chair will entertain a motion on the committee substitute. By Senator Caslin. Do I have a second by Senator Nemes? All those in favor will signify by saying aye. Aye. The opposed, like sign. The ayes have it. Very well. So the bill to which I'll be speaking today is House Bill 1 with the Senate committee substitute in it. Before I get going, I would be remiss if I ever started a conversation like this without thanking the staff. These documents simply do not come together without Jenny Bannister, Greg Troutman, and the work of the staff downstairs, and on our staff, Jennifer Rowe, Jim Bondurant, and Morgan Cecil, who's not here with us today. So first of all, I want us all to express our gratitude to those folks. Okay, that being said, Commonwealth's two-year spending plan has been a unique experience this year. This is actually the sixth budget that I have been affiliated with, and it's the first time in those budgets that the entirety of growth revenue was not consumed by pensions and Medicaid. We had the ability this year to fund additional priorities in the Commonwealth, and we took a very conservative yet measured approach to those priorities. Our number one priority that we felt the need to address was the fact that the state's workforce for the last 15 years has been widely without any kind of a raise. There have been targeted raises throughout that point in time, but by and large, there has been no across-the-board increases inside of the state workforce. So this budget provides for two raises equivalent to 10% for every state employee in year one and in year two. The year one raise is an aggregated number of 10% for the entirety of the state workforce divided evenly amongst all of those workers. So what you end up with is $4,500 per employee per year, or per employee in the first year. That number obviously means if it's an employee making less than $45,000 per year, they will see an increase of greater than 10%. If they're making more than $45,000, it will be slightly less than that. Another amount is set aside in year two for a second year raise compounded on top of the first. That, though, requires some work from the personnel cabinet, namely the fact that we will be requiring them to perform a locality as well as a positional study to make sure that we are appropriately allocating money across the Commonwealth's workforce. Also, the state police, there's money allocated for $15,000 per state trooper. It is not provided with any structure. There is a bill currently in this committee, which we will probably be hearing next week, that will assign the structure to those raises. For social workers, there is a $4,800 per year increase on the 1st of July, as well as a 10% year two raise. Also, what this budget will largely reflect is the fact that we believe there are additional difficulties for the state's social workers, and we have directed the cabinet to develop an alternative work program whereby the Commonwealth social workers would spend 4 years on the front lines of social work and then a year in some kind of an assignment to try to give them a bit of a mental break from the work that they do every day. Senator Douglas, would you like to explain the medical examiner portion of this?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We took a look at our medical examiners and what they were wanting. As a physician, I know the protocol and who does what. we felt it was important to increase not only our number of medical examiners, but also our number of technicians. We've fallen behind in that particular area, so we took a look at the raises in those areas, but mostly we wanted to make sure that we were allowing our case loads to flow well. And in order to do that, we needed to have more manpower. So that was a really important part of our budget. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Douglas. Inside of this budget, we have funded for some urgent needs schools. There were several rules that were applied to that. First of all, we did not fund inflationary costs. We also established the rule that bonding capacity had to be less than 75% of the estimated cost of the school, and we funded 75% of the difference between bonding potential and the estimated cost. However, there are several school districts who in House Bill 556 received an allocation. If the amount in the formula I previously referenced is less than the allocation of 556, the schools get the greater of those amounts. However, any school that received funding must have in place 2 nickels. Another rule that we established is that LAVEC schools that get or districts that get schools under this section cannot also receive a school under the LAVEC section of the budget. At this point, Senator Givens, would you like to speak to the LAVEC conversation?
Chair McDaniel, I will, and for all of you in the audience or listening today, and Chair McDaniel was very kind in the reflection he made back on the staff. I think it's also important to note his leadership as we've worked through this process. We could not be where we are without his motivation and sometimes prodding, sometimes leading, but certainly need to share some compliments with him. On LAVEC funding, I want to talk briefly about the role workforce plays and the role their education system plays in preparing the workers of the next generation. And so we've taken a two-pronged approach to trying to address the LAVEC and the workforce conversation among our schools. Chair McDaniel touched on the fact that under facilities funding, we have a LAVEC funding component. If you're in that urgent needs list and getting a school and some funds to help facilitate a facility there, you do not qualify for a LAVEC-funded facility, which lets us broaden the number of LAVEC facilities we can add to that list. So we do have some funding for facilities and structures. In addition, we take the initial base of about $65 million that we put into local area vocational centers that we've done historically across the state, and we magnify that significantly. We first bring in those since 2001 that were LAVECs that were not getting funding, and we fund them at a full-time equivalent. Then we go ahead and capture the newly established LAVECs that are qualified, add them to the pot, and then we further reach down and get LAVECs that have 4 or less in some cases, of pathways that qualify. So we are seeking to eliminate the conversation about some LAVECs being unfunded and some funded. We're in essence adding about $62 million on top of the $65 million base. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Givens. Inside of the SEEK funding formula, we felt it was important to recognize, first of all, the fact that there has been a large dollar amount, close to $1.9 billion, through ARPA and CARES Act funding that's flowed into the schools, but it was also still important to continue to invest in those schools. So we put in $4,100 in the first year and $4,200 in the second year for the SEEK per pupil guarantee. And in the second year of the biennium, we funded 70% of the transportation amount, but as opposed to the houses, we ran that through the existing formula rather than having a new formula in there. Also, SFCC bonds, there's been a lot of talk about the fact that those had a sunset date of 2038. We did return those to a normal 20-year cycle. Also, the model school at Eastern Kentucky University receives full funding in this. Inside of CPE, all the schools received their same base that they had previously received, but we added $87 million to the performance-based funding formula, and that will flow, or $87 million, and that will flow through the performance-based funding model. We fully funded the Bucks for Brains program inside of this budget, and we also added in asset preservation money in the range of $300 million. It does require from the state's flagship universities a 50% match and a 25% match from the comprehensive universities. Inside of the retirement system, we do fully fund the actuarially required contribution to all of the systems and also add $215 million in supplementary funding to the state police retirement system. The Center for Applied Energy Research receives an additional $5 million each year for research grant matches that will largely probably go to research with the Department of Defense and Department of Energy. We put in $500,000 to audit workforce initiatives inside of the Commonwealth, $1 million for substance abuse program reviews. There's a $4 per day per diem increase for the Commonwealth's prisoners who are housed in county jails. At the Department of Criminal Justice Training, we do fully fund the firing range as requested from the department. We also allocate money in the we allocate money for a study at the Madisonville, the current training campus in Madisonville in the first year, and then also $25 million in the second year for funding of a dormitory, with the intent being that in the first year of the next biennium, the Department of Criminal Justice Training will open a second regional or a second training facility for basic police officer training in Madisonville, Kentucky. We established a nonprofit grant pool, and inside of the nonprofit grant pool, there is $75 million. The grantees will receive up to $75,000, not to exceed for the 2 years of the pandemic, their net negative cash flow. So $75,000 is the cap for a nonprofit, up to the amount of their net negative cash flow for those 2 years. Inside of the tobacco sheet, we moved the spinal cord research into a general fund funded item, but we did add lung cancer screening as a new tobacco sheet item. We also provided $25 million for voting machines in the online deed portal as requested by the county clerks. We added 500 Michelle P. waiver slots and 200 SCL Supports for Community Living slots inside of this budget. We directed the State Fair Board to conduct a study of the fairgrounds in year one, and in year two allocated $200 million for a comprehensive overhaul of the state fairgrounds. We also recognize the need that here at the Capitol we have a number of issues. For your visitor, they will show up and see peeling paint. What they won't realize is that peeling paint is a result of the inability to move water out of the Capitol, and that's a result of the fact that the HVAC system is 60 years old and can't keep up with the fact that the roof is leaking because the concrete is deteriorating and there aren't adequate bathrooms, and on and on and on. So it will cost about $250 million over 6 years, and that entire amount is allocated in year two of this budget. There is $200 million per the governor's request that gets transferred to the road fund to provide matching funds for the federal grants for mega projects. State parks is another one. Year one, we direct a study by the State Park Commission. And in year two, there is $250 million authorized for a complete overhaul of the Kentucky State Park system. Further, there's $5 million in each year allocated to child advocacy centers, $3.5 million each year for domestic violence centers, and $1.5 million each year allocated to rape crisis centers. At the end of the budget that we have presented today, we have some other priorities that we wanted to accomplish. The first is the Budget Reserve Trust Fund. This is the Commonwealth Savings Account. Those sitting on this committee will remember that just a decade ago we walked in with no money in the Commonwealth Savings Account. At the end of this budgetary cycle, we will have $1.75 billion set aside for a rainy day. In addition to that money, our debt ratio will be slightly over 5%. In our unappropriated reserve, which is money that we did not spend and can be available for a variety of purposes, is $1.278 billion. even after factoring in the account that this body felt it appropriate to refund to the taxpayers of the Commonwealth $500 for a single filer and $1,000 for joint filers. So at this time, the chair will entertain any questions on the budget that is in front of us. Senator McGarvey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to clarify what you just said. $1.75 billion in the rainy day fund, $1.28 billion in just unappropriated money right now, and that takes into account the roughly $1.15 billion that would be expended if there were the tax rebate.
That is correct.
Thank you.
We have a motion from Senator Caslin. Do I have a second from Senator Douglas? Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Carroll.
Aye.
Senator Caslin. Senator Douglas. Senator Givens. Senator Kerr. Senator McGarvey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to explain my no vote.
Cast your vote, or go ahead and explain, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, I'll start off by thanking you, thanking staff for the work on this bill. I know that it takes a lot of work to put together. I also know that this is probably not the last time we will be voting on a budget this session. I also appreciate you coming in this morning an hour before this committee hearing and taking questions from my caucus. Now I want to go to the bad part of this. Only an hour before today's committee hearing did we receive any information on the budget. There was no testimony in front of this committee, even on the House budget from members of the House. We received an hour presentation from John Hicks in the governor's office, but that's it. Now here we are, 17 minutes into a committee hearing, voting out the Senate budget that none of us have actually seen, at least in the minority caucus, the paperwork for before right now. This is not the way to make policy in Frankfort. The state's budget is not just our ultimate policy document, it's a moral document. It is where we put the state's priorities. We don't even know where all of those priorities right now and expected to vote on it. That is not the way to do business in Frankfort. I vote no.
Senator Meredith. Senator Nemes. Senator Webb. Senator West. Chair McDaniel.
I cast an aye vote and explain and thank once again everyone on this committee for their work on this. And I will remind my good friend from Jefferson County that we heard testimony from nearly every cabinet during the course of the interim. We've also heard testimony from the Cabinet for Health and Family Services and several others throughout the course of this. In addition, in the 7 weeks that the budget has been in this chamber, I've received not one word or contact from the minority party regarding what they would like to see in this. And certainly we do look forward to continuing to work with them and with others in this process. And we certainly do appreciate their time today. Seeing no other questions come before the committee, we'll stand adjourned.